High above Brandenburg on April 24, 1944, the air was razor-thin, every breath searing the lungs like ice. Inside the cramped cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf 109G6, Major Gunther Rall felt his oxygen mask cloud with each exhale as he sank deeper into his seat. His hand stayed steady, but his eyes betrayed something else entirely. Disbelief. An American fighter was still there. Still clinging to his tail. Every dive, every sudden roll, every desperate maneuver, the enemy stayed locked on, relentless as a shadow. In his headset, the calm discipline of German voices had given way to panic. These weren't rookies. These were the elite of Jagdgeschwader 11, men who had ruled Europe's skies since 1940. Yet now, they were shouting warnings like frightened cadets on their first combat flight. Indianer at 6 o'clock. Still with me at 400 kilometers per hour. How is he still there? For years, German pilots had lived by a simple rulebook of survival. American fighters could not follow them home. They lacked the range, the altitude, the endurance. The Luftwaffe's aircraft were kings of the high air over the Reich. But on this morning, every one of those truths shattered. The hunter on Rall's tail was something new. The P-51B Mustang, and it had changed the game. Its Packard-built Merlin engine sang a haunting metallic tune through the thin atmosphere, a Predator song that German pilots were only beginning to fear. 600 miles from its English base, the Mustang still had fuel for an hour of combat, plus the long trip home. Rall glanced at his own gauges. 15 minutes of fuel left until Brandenburg. In that instant, all the old equations of air combat, fuel, range, altitude, advantage, collapsed. The hunters of Europe had become the hunted, even above their own capital. What Rall witnessed that cold morning was more than a dogfight. It was the first unraveling thread of the Luftwaffe's downfall. Within a year, Germany would lose 3/4 of its pilots, 9 out of 10 of its aces, and with them, total control of its skies. And the weapon that made it possible. A machine conceived in just 102 days, powered by a British heart, mass-produced in numbers beyond German imagination, and flown by pilots trained faster than the Reich could shoot them down. To understand how this miracle of engineering arrived, we must turn back the clock to August 17, 1943. On that day, the U.S. 8th Air Force struck deep into Germany's industrial core, targeting Schweinfurt and Regensburg. 60B, 17 flying fortresses were lost in flames. 600 American airmen never returned. German fighter production, astonishingly, continued to rise. For every bomber destroyed, 10 trained American crewmen vanished. Men who had taken months to prepare. To Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's brilliant but overconfident general, the math seemed too good to be true. America's daylight bombing campaign, he assured his staff, was doomed to fail. Their fighters cannot escort beyond the Rhine, he declared confidently in September 1943. We can simply wait for the escorts to turn back, then destroy the bombers at our leisure. And for a time the strategy worked. On October 14th, the infamous Black Thursday, the 8th Air Force lost another 60 bombers and 650 men. For 4 long months, no deep raids into Germany were attempted. German pilots toasted to victory. Geography, it seemed, was their greatest ally. But across the Atlantic, engineers and planners were already shaping a weapon that would make Galland's calculations meaningless. The North American P-51 Mustang was born from a British request in 1940. Designed in a breathtaking 102 days, its prototype flying less than 5 months after signing. The first versions, powered by the Allison V1710 engine, struggled above 15,000 feet, the very altitude where the bombers needed protection most. Then came a single, brilliant idea. In April 1942, a Rolls-Royce test pilot proposed fitting the Mustang with the legendary Merlin engine. That decision, the fusion of American design and British engineering genius, would change the air war forever. The Packard Motor Company of Detroit soon began producing Merlins under license, harnessing the unstoppable force of American mass production. By late 1943, hundreds rolled off the lines each month. each one delivering more than 1,600 horsepower at altitudes where the Luftwaffe once felt untouchable. Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, America's air attaché in London, saw it before anyone else. In 1942, he wrote, "The P-51 with the Merlin engine will be the best fighter in the world above 25,000 feet. It will escort bombers to Berlin and back." This one aircraft could change the entire strategic situation in Europe. And on December 1, 1943, German pilots learned just how right he was. A formation of Focke-Wulf 190s, confident that the American escorts had turned back, dove toward a bomber formation near Soest, only to freeze in disbelief. Sleek new fighters still flew beside the bombers. 8 Mustangs from the 334th Fighter Squadron had gone farther into Germany than any escort in history. Drop tanks gave them another 150 miles of range, and for the first time the Luftwaffe met resistance where they had always felt safe. 2 weeks later, shock turned to horror. During a major raid on Kiel, 420 miles from the nearest Allied base, P-51BS not only stayed with the bombers, they turned the tables, hunting German fighters in their own skies. Veteran ace Major George Peter Eder of JG-1, with 78 kills to his name, admitted the truth with unease. The Mustang couldn't be trapped with old tactics. It climbed faster, dove deeper, flew farther, and worst of all, it didn't break away when German pilots had to. By early 1944, German intelligence finally obtained hard Mustang performance data, and what they saw chilled them. 440 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Range nearly 3,000 miles with drop tanks. Ceiling of 42,000 feet. 6.50 caliber guns with almost 2,000 rounds. Superior climb rate above 20,000 feet. And most terrifying of all, a laminar flow wing, slicing drag by 30%, granting speed and efficiency no German fighter could rival. The era of Luftwaffe supremacy was over, and they knew it. February 1944, the moment the tide of the air war truly turned. The Americans unleashed what they called Big Week. 5 relentless days of coordinated bombing raids aimed directly at the heart of Germany's aircraft industry. Over 1,000 heavy bombers thundered across the skies, escorted by nearly as many fighters, and among them, an ever-growing number of the sleek, lethal P-51 Mustangs. By the time the smoke cleared, the Luftwaffe had lost 355 fighters, and far more devastatingly, about 100 of its most experienced leaders. Men whose tactical instincts had been forged over years of combat. Their loss left a generation of raw recruits to fill the void, brave but unprepared, guided now by luck instead of leadership. Then came March 4, 1944, a day that marked a grim milestone in German history. For the first time, American bombers struck Berlin itself, flying under the protection of fighter escorts. 660 heavy bombers, flanked by swarms of P-51s, P-38s, and P-47s, darkened the skies above the German capital. Adolf Galland, one of the Luftwaffe's most respected aces, flew that day. His report to Hermann Göring afterward was brutally honest. They had been outnumbered 3-1, outclimbed, outrun, and outmaneuvered. Galland himself was chased for nearly 30 miles by 2 Mustangs that seemed to have endless fuel. And below, the people of Berlin, long told that the Luftwaffe ruled the skies, looked up in shock. American fighters circled arrogantly above the Brandenburg Gate, symbols of a war that was turning against them. By April, the Mustang pilots added a terrifying new tactic. After escorting the bombers to their targets, they dropped to treetop level on the way home, strafing airfields, trains, and hangars with ruthless precision. German bases that had once breathed easy once the bombers passed now became killing grounds. On April 13th, 42 Mustangs from the 4th Fighter Group destroyed 51 German aircraft on the ground, in barely half an hour. By May, the Luftwaffe's situation was catastrophic. Pilot shortages were now a full-blown crisis. Replacements were being sent into combat with barely 100 hours of flight time, some with as little as 80. Against American pilots averaging 400 hours of training, the results were tragically predictable. The introduction of the Me-262 jet fighter that summer offered a flicker of hope. It was faster than the Mustang by over 100 miles per hour, capable of outclimbing anything in the sky. But Germany lacked the fuel to keep it airborne, and the experienced pilots to fly it. The engines lasted barely 25 hours before failure, and the Mustangs adapted fast, waiting near jet airfields to strike as the Me-262s took off or landed, when they were most vulnerable. Even Germany's wonder weapon couldn't turn the tide. By autumn, the P-51s were systematically shredding Germany's transportation network. Rail yards, bridges, locomotives, convoys, nothing was safe. On September 11, 1944, just 36 Mustangs destroyed 81 locomotives in a single day. Albert Speer, the Reich's armaments minister, wrote bitterly in his diary, "The American fighters have achieved what the heavy bombers could not: complete paralysis of transportation." By 1945, the confidence that once fueled the Luftwaffe had turned to desperation. On April 7th, in one final, hopeless act, hundreds of young pilots were ordered to ram American bombers, a suicide mission born of madness. The result was slaughter. American escorts, including Mustangs, tore through them mercilessly. Of nearly 200 planes launched, fewer than 70 returned. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe's skies, was finished. The final numbers told the story with brutal clarity. 15,000 Mustangs built. Nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. Over 4,000 more annihilated on the ground. A kill ratio of almost 4-to-1. German fighter strength, which had stood at 1,600 operational aircraft in January 1944, fell to barely 300 by April 1945. The skies that had once belonged to the Luftwaffe now belonged entirely to the Mustang. Yet the P-51 was far more than just a fighter plane. It was the physical embodiment of an entire system. The triumph of production, logistics, and organization working in perfect harmony. It was born of Allied cooperation, British ingenuity fused with American industrial might, flown by pilots who were trained not hastily, but with discipline and depth. Behind every Mustang that took to the air stood factories running around the clock, turning out a new aircraft every 90 minutes, supported by a free society united in purpose and will. Even Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's legendary ace who once mocked American air power, would later admit the truth. The P-51 was not necessarily superior in every respect to our fighters, but it was good enough in all respects. Built in overwhelming numbers, flown by well-trained men, and backed by an industrial machine no totalitarian state could ever match. And General Gunther Rall, who survived the war with 275 victories to his name, said it even more bluntly. The Mustang didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed our entire idea of air superiority. We believed in skill and tactics. The Americans believed in systems and strategy. They fought a different kind of war, and they won. The P-51 Mustang was the blade, sleek, deadly, and precise. But the hand that wielded it was something far greater. A free society that could outbuild, outthink, and outlast any tyranny. In the end, the very pilots who once laughed at American fighters learned the truth the hard way, from the wrong end of 6.50 caliber guns, high above the burning ruins of the Reich. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful World War II moments, and share this video to keep these stories of courage and innovation alive for future generations.